Namaskar, friends. Today I came here with a very beautiful gift for you, with an idea, with my very old friend from a very old time, Menna Elfyn, and I'm proud to be her friend, and I'm proud to be talk about her. That she is a poet who has given voice to his people, his language. She is activist. She has worked with very down to very desperate people and all kind of people, and who has actually she has done many things in her life along with the poetry, and she is the, I will say that she is the leading poet, women poet from the Welsh. So friends, I invite Menna Elfyn, who is a very strong poet, many poetry books, who writes in Welsh and translates, get translated, or her translate herself translate into English. She is the first Welsh poet who is internationally very popular poet. More than this, I want to talk about Menna in a light of our own country. We have 28 languages. We were also colony of British once. She belongs to Wales, which is still colony of Britain. But they have fought for their language. अपनी भाषा की अस्मिता की लड़ाई. That is the most important thing. That they could bring back their language. And I'm lucky that I stayed with her in her home, beautiful home, 3 stories. I remember her cats, her libraries, and all these things, her universities. And I saw that there are many books are coming, and they are very, what we say that they are very careful to use language. भाषा कोई हम केवल लिखने से नहीं लिख लेते हैं. They are writing books for the children in Welsh language. You know that they are in still the colony of British, but they have own identity. यदि आप इंग्लैंड से वेल्स में जाते हैं तो आपको मालूम पड़ जाएगा ये अलग कंट्री है, अलग देश है. If you go from England to Welsh, you will find the difference. You will find the culture difference. You will find the tradition, the smile of the face, and you will find that how powerful these people are who fought for many years. Their fight was very long because I worked on it and I studied that how long their fight from very ancient time to modern time. Many stories we read from distance about the coal workers, about but we can't touch them. We cannot understand until we go and meet a writer like Menna Elfyn, who knows the history of Wales on her tongue of tip, who lived with that history and who fought for her language. Menna Elfyn, I'm very pleased to invite you in this Kritya stage, and I feel that we can learn a lot from you. So, welcome, Menna.
Thank you, Rati. Prynhawn da, that means good afternoon in Welsh, and it is wonderful to be seeing you and talking to you again. And also because Welsh has a history with India. We both Hindi and Welsh, they are a Proto-Indo-European language, and there is a big connection. We have a similar accent. Sometimes people hear someone speaking Welsh and think they are Indian, or when they speak in Indian, they think they are Welsh. And so we have a connection because of the Sanskrit language and the history of both languages. So yes, I'm pleased to be with you this afternoon, and just to say that we are not, although sometimes we think we're a colony, we do now have, because people have voted for it, we have our own Senedd, our own Senate. So we are a nation that's still growing and still growing in stature and status. And you will know that Scotland has had their similar history to us. They have their Senate, they have their own government, and so do we. But of course, most things, or a lot of things, are decided in London, in the Parliament there, and we are still fighting for more and more powers. Yes. Do you want to carry on?
No, I want to tell you that, as you say that, when I came to Welsh, because when my daughter was there, you remember that. So I feel that I didn't feel that I am in England, because we have a fear of with this English white people, a kind of fear, because we do not know how they take us. But when I was in Wales, I feel that very closeness. You can talk to anyone on the though you don't know the language. Even the lady I saw in a bus, she saw my slipper and said that she likes very much my shoes, and but with the action only. And that is a very friendly, like Indian kind of culture, that you meet someone and then you start talking about your slipper, your dress, or your bindi, or your chudi, and you started trying to talk. That same thing happened in India also. We also do the same thing.
Yes.
So that thing, that connection, I felt that warmth. Then you go to bus, and that the driver all the way is joking. Uh, all the way he was joking, making fun, speaking, many jokes he was creating on the way, and it was all the time we were laughing. So that
Yes.
laughter, that smile is very rare in some so-called high-class European countries. You have to be careful that you should not look like, oh, you're uncultured or like that. So in that case, and another thing I felt that in Welsh you don't hug, like Indians. uh, and mostly shaking hand is also not very common like Indians,
Yeah.
but smiling is like Indians.
Yeah.
So I feel very, very Indian when I was there. And I read. There are many stories about Wells which I write and I like very much. But today we will talk about you. You belong to a very good family. Your father was a minister and in a church, and you belong to a better family than compared to other Welsh family at that your time. And you say that when you were 11 years old, while talking in a dinner and all, I read your article, and then that time you came to know about what is happening, what is the fear of language, though you were learning at that time in English medium school. So I want to know this story from you.
Right. Well, I wouldn't say I had a better home than many people, but it was a very literary home, full of books. I played the harp, musical family as well. But education when I was growing up was totally in English. I went to a primary school, and of course every lesson was in English, and then I'd go home and speak Welsh at home. And this changed in the 60s, because in the 60s, not only myself, but a lot of people began to worry that the Welsh language did not have a status, was not accepted as an official language of the country. Everything was in English, education and forms and government offices. And so there was a movement that began called the Welsh Language Movement, Cymdeithas yr Iaith. And with that movement, many of us, hundreds in fact, started to do what we call civil disobedience. We were following Gandhi and Martin Luther King. They had their civil rights in America. We had our language rights to be won. And so we did a lot of things that made us break the law, but always peacefully, always non-violently. And I think because of that, we won through. I think we won many things because of that. Welsh language road signs, Welsh education, a television channel in Welsh. And so Welsh became, in the last 2 decades or so, more acceptable. More people wanted their children to be not one language, not only English, but bilingual. And so we now have a situation in Wales where 2 languages, live side by side and are accepted as being official. Of course, there's still a lot of way to go to make sure that other languages are accepted. We have a great Indian population for example, in Cardiff. I wrote a stage play, and the Indian population there, Bengali, and we had Hindi, we had Gujarati, we had many of those people acting in the play in their languages. So I wrote a play that was in Welsh, English, Latin, Gujarati, Hindi, Punjabi, and it was a great success. So I think that gives you a little glimpse into the things that have changed in Wales with the language. But there is always the fear that we are still a minority language, because the Welsh language was banned in the 19th century. There was what was called the Welsh Not, where children, if they were caught speaking Welsh in the school, would have to wear a wooden board around their neck and Welsh Not, and they would be punished at the end of the day. So that is why the Welsh language went down a hill in that century, and now it's come back with great brio, with great gusto. Yeah.
Yeah, that is very great thing actually what Welsh has done. But and because you bring back that history, what I was reading, that you people have to go to jail, prison. You being
Yes.
a daughter of a minister and you were in a prison
Yes.
against your the dignity, so-called dignity. I don't say that, so-called, like Indians also, we said, oh, these are the girls, dignity, dignified place, and then
Yeah.
you have fighting, you are going to jail, and or you're fighting for the language. And language is not only one thing actually. Language is something which is a identity of a human. So
Yes.
that is why it is very important. Yeah.
Yes, and when I came out of prison, the first time I went to prison, I went twice. The first time I came out and realized I was a feminist. I went in as a language activist and came out realizing that there were women in prison who had no language at all. They had no power, no sense of the education. I went in as a student, and all these things made one realize that not only one, it isn't only one cause, language, it's so many other issues, which I have said in one poem, I think. I went in for a cause, but came out with new causes. And I think that's true of everyday life, isn't it? That there's
Yeah,
always...
that is true, because in your poem, which I have mentioned that I want to read it, that at that age when you were quite young, you were listening to your neighbor, her and her pain, her sorrow. The next door, that next door is when you were in prison, I think, no?
Yes,
And you were listening, and most of the, because I saw that in a Malayalam, there is one poet whom I respect a lot, that is Balamani Amma. She does not leave a single she belonged to she did not go to school, and she belonged to a different kind of situation, but she did not leave a single situation where she can mm, hide, or, well, she cannot talk about the deprived people. But your poems, I like that you are talking not only the deprived by by money, you are talking about the mental also. In many poems I find that you touch the issue of like one poem, you are talking about a boy who had a problem but who was very good in the music. So in that also, the next door also, uh, this poem, I find that uh, how you were very, very careful to listen, to understand. Your ears were open, you could not see who is your next door, but you could feel her, and you could write about her. That impressed me a lot, because you were young at that time, quite young at that time.
I was I was about 19, but it's not a matter of listening. Because she was so loud, um,
Uh,
I could not help but listen because she was singing out of tune. So I begin the poem, as you say, in saying, "Oh, um, I want to listen to good music, not listen to her voice singing out of tune." But in the end, I think
uh,
the poem ends
uh,
believing in her out of tuneness, and feeling for her, feeling a sense of sympathy with her, empathy. Do
that
you?
empathy only makes you poet, no?
Well, yes, because we feel one less layer of skin, as it were. I don't know whether you want to read a bit of that in
Yeah,
Hindi
please.
or
I will. Yes, we will read in both language.
okay.
We will read in Hindi and Welsh both. Shall I read first, or you read
Yes,
first?
you read first, and I will read some in Welsh and then some in English, and most in English. Yes.
ओके, सो दिस इज द नेक्स्ट डोर इन इंग्लिश। हिंदी में इसका नाम मैंने पड़ोसी दिया है। जब मैना एल्फिन 19 साल की आयु में जेल में थी, उसके भाषाई आंदोलन के संदर्भ में जब वो जेल में थी, तो उनके बगल में कमरे में जो चीखने की, रात को 2 बजे चीखने की, गाने की आवाज आती थी, और उसके आधार पर उन्होंने उसके कष्ट को महसूस किया। और अंत, हालांकि शुरू में वो उनको तकलीफ हुई, लेकिन बाद में उसके दुख को उन्होंने महसूस किया कि वो कितनी तकलीफ में है। तो रात के कटघरे के भीतर अतलांटिका 252 में मैं बंदनी हूँ। लड़ सकती हूँ मैं अतलांटिका की लहरों से, ये लहरें प्रेम की हैं। वे जानती हैं आरोह को, वे जानती हैं अवरोह को, लहरों के शिखर पर टेक को बार बार गाती हुई। कोई मजाक नहीं है, पतली दीवारों के पार उसकी आवाज स्थाई से भरी होती है, कामना से, जो हर और स्वर और धुन को उतार कर इस तरह नंगा करती है कि मैं कांपने लगती हूँ। अब मैं उसे देखने की तमन्ना करती हूँ, पास में रहती उस औरत को जो मेरी चारदीवारी में गिरने वाली गूलर की पत्तियों पर दहाड़ती है। इन दिनों कुछ भी भयभीत नहीं करता है, लेकिन इतवार को प्रार्थना करने वाले उपदेशक से जरूर डर लगने लगता है। हम उसे गाने का हिस्सा बनाना चाहते हैं। क्या हुआ यदि वह सुर में नहीं है? और क्या हुआ यदि उसका गाना कठोर है? लेकिन मैं उसके एकल गायक के सम्मोहन में जलने लगती हूँ। हमारा खून उबाल खाता है और एक दर्द होता है। मैं उसके कष्टों को महसूस करने लगती हूँ, अंधेरे में खोई लड़की के कसेले मीठेपन से, जो अपने तीखे गीतों की जंजीरों में बांध कर बेसुरा गुनगुनाती है। इट्स अ ब्यूटीफुल पोएम at that time you have written. It's so beautiful. So,
Okay.
हाँ हाँ, please read in
I,
English
I
and
will
Welsh.
read
Uh,
some in Welsh and most of it in English and finish in Welsh. A thrwyf ar nos bym yn wistl I Atlantic 252 yn meddylu am ei werydd lle gawn gyfle I wthio ei thonau ond tonfedd cariad sydd yma. Ond nid yr rhain a ddeall ei orlif, ond nid yr rhain a ddeall I drai ar ddistyll y Don. And through the bars of night, I'm hostage to Atlantic 252. I could do battle with Atlantic waves, but these are love's waves, who alone know the floods, who alone know the ebb at the wave's crest. Still she sings the refrain over and over, and it's no joke through thin walls. Her voice brims with a prelude to desire that undresses notes so naked that I too am shivering. Now I long to face her, a woman next door droning on about her sycamore leaves falling my side of the fence. How nothing's sacred these days. What is sacred here but the preacher offering a psalm on Sunday? We yearn to belong to the song. So what if she's out of tune? So though her song is harsh with her, I burn for the soloist who plays our blood. I hurt for him, suffer his blues, bittersweet, to let her be a girl lost in the dark and hum along out of tune in the chains of her shrill songs. A hymian gyda hi allan o diwn yng nghadwyni I halawon main.
thank you very much. So now I I just want to know that you talk about that your mother was always writing notes in Welsh, and you were not supposed to use those notes. Even
Yes.
in a prison, you were forced to speak in English. It happened in India also. It happens still in schools. There are convent schools where if you speak in other language, you get punished, which is very bad. Because what I feel that all the time you are listening the nature in your mother tongue, then how could you speak? Or all the time you can speak in English, and it is almost like cutting the roots. What I feel that you are a great poet because you loved your language also, and you were very sensitive. You were listening others. So please share some more experience, because I see many things about in your article, very interesting. So please share some more interesting thing about your journey.
Well, I suppose my journey, as I said, was fighting for the language, and along with so many others, I must say that. And of course, as I also said, that I have also done things apart from fighting for the language. I was a professor of creative writing at the university, and I taught at a school before that. And I have written a great deal in Welsh, as I said, with plays. Also, finding materials. One of the most interesting things I did was write materials in Welsh for children who have learning difficulties or aren't able to read quickly, slow learners they were called at that time. And so I wrote many books for these children, for the children in various schools. That was an interesting project. I've done a lot with children. I've also wrote a novel about the street children of Mexico, because I feel that children's rights are also important. And I went out to Mexico and saw children on the streets because of the kind of situation that they found themselves in, leaving home because of abuse. I've also written books about stereotyping in Welsh and in English, and what we have is in Wales, Carmarthen women's refuges. I'm not sure if that is something that happens with you a lot, but I wrote these books for them, and many other things. I'm now president of Wales Pen Cymru, and so the language, although we have fought for the language, we are also fighting for writers in prison, and at the moment we are concentrating as a centre in Wales to try and release early some of the prisoners in Turkish jails who are there because they are Kurds and because they too speak a language, the Kurdish language. And so I find a connection between all kinds of people around the world who are speaking a language that is banned or seen as being political if you speak it, and try and get to change the situation. I think a writer wants to create a world they can live in, that is the human spirit and the human condition and dignity of all people. So, yes, is that enough for you now?
What I was also astonished to see when I read your this article. It is the part of your book that you were interested in Kurdish language. And I know that some friends of me are one Kurd poet, but I understand. I stand with them, but how could you work with them? That is another thing, because I have translated some of your poems which you have written about the Mexican children. But how did you talk to? Did you learn Spanish to talk to them, to communicate with them? Because there are many poems you talk about the I remember that grapes, with the grapes, one poem is there where you are talking with the, what you say, that goon, and it's a very naturally he was talking about his cruelty, and the boy who is treated very badly because he's not but he's good in a music. So many poetry, actually your poetry is telling us that about the society all over the world. And then you have written a lot about Vietnamese problem. Actually, we were not knowing, we know the Vietnam War, but we were not knowing that what is happening. But after reading your poems, I came to know a bit about those pains, those sorrows. So, how did you get involved in all these things?
Well, talking about Vietnam in the 60s, that is what turned me into some kind of poet at that time. It's what Auden said of Yeats, he hurt into poetry, and I was hurt into writing about what was happening in Vietnam, because Vietnam, the way that war developed, that unjust war, unnecessary war, as all wars are, but it for a teenager, it really pained me greatly. And at the same time, in Wales, we were seeing ourselves as a little country, side by side with a big country like England telling us, how we should live. And here was America trying to change what was happening in Vietnam. And so I was lucky enough to go to Vietnam in the early 90s to write a documentary, to do research. I went there on my own for 3 weeks and came back, and then went back with a filming crew. And this was before tourism has taken off. It's now very popular to go to Vietnam. But I went when the place was not open for tourists, and saw the devastation there of some of the countryside, but also the resilience of the people, their spirit, their sense of being able to forgive, their sense of serenity. And I wonder whether it's to do with religion, that, they are able to forgive what happened. And so I feel an affinity with Vietnam. And I tell myself, if we're ever allowed on a plane again, I might go back there and meet up with some of the poets there. Some will have passed away by now, but there was one poet there called Anne Tho, and she was a wonderful poet, very well-known poet in Vietnam. She lost 3 sons to different wars. One war with America, one with Cambodia, and another with China, I believe. And to think of her being able to be the poet she was, with that kind of loss, to lose 3 sons, it stayed with me all that time. And yes, I have written a lot about other countries. People say that my poetry is always seeing the people on the edge. It's about
Yes.
giving voice to the voiceless, to those who can't write poetry or won't write poetry. And it's taking their pain sometimes. But some of my poetry is also full of humor, so I don't want people to think I only write about sad things. I also write about funny things. But Zimbabwe is another country that I have a great deal of affinity with, and I'm still in touch with some writers I've mentored there. And I produced a book, I'm not sure if I gave you a copy, Sunflowers in the Rain, and it's a book of 4 Zimbabwe women writers. And it was the first time ever for women writers to have a book in English published here in Wales. And those poets are remarkable, how honest they were. Once or twice I had to ask them, are you sure this is really being very critical of the government or critical of various people? And they would say, no, we have to tell the truth. And so I brought out this book. And there are other countries that I have visited that I also am still in touch with some people, as well as some countries like America, where I was supposed to be this fall, this winter in Philadelphia. But I'm very glad to be at home and writing.
Shall we read this poem that May in the My Lai?
Oh, yes.
That is actually, this is a very, very painful poem, very painful and very beautiful, and aesthetic form also. It is beautiful because the aesthetics of this poetry, these poems are also beautiful. So shall I start in Hindi first?
Yes.
तो ये जो कविता है माई लाई, मई मास में, ये माई लाई एक जगह है वियतनाम में जहां पर 1968 में 16 मार्च 1968 में उन्होंने उस गांव के पूरे एक अमेरिकन सैनिक टुकड़ी जो 347 और 504 के बीच की थी, वहां पे इतने सारे जो वहां के निवासी थे, उनका कत्लेआम कर दिया गया था, उसको बिल्कुल खत्म कर दिया गया था, वो पूरा के पूरा गांव। और जब मैना एल्फिन, जैसा उन्होंने बताया कि वो वियतनाम में डॉक्यूमेंट्री बनाने गई, तो उन्होंने वहां पर उसको देखा और वहां पर उसको महसूस किया, और मई में वो गई थी और उसको उन्होंने फील किया. Just you imagine that when the whole city was cleared, that that finished, and because uh, uh, ये जो वियतनाम युद्ध है, वो आप लोग कल्पना नहीं कर सकते हैं कि किस तरह का था. इट वॉज अ वेरी क्रूअल, बिकॉज आई हैव गॉन recently. I have gone 2 times to Vietnam. Now it has very established country, very beautiful country also. There is no doubt. It is a good tourist, but you can understand the history. You can read the history behind it, and when you read the pain for their history, it's very painful. So my लाई में मई मास, घास पर गड़ी ये मूर्तियां बूढ़ी नहीं होती, ना ही शिकायत करती हैं कि उन्हें अपना काम पसंद नहीं है. तेज सूरज उन पर निगरानी करता है, तब भी वहां जमीन के भीतर से कोई फुसफुसा रहा है. यहाँ घाटी का झरना गांठदार हो रहा है, रक्त की उग्रता में अनुदित करते हुए. वहां सांझ को पत्थर को झुलसाने वाले दिनों में, जहां बाजारी बतके अभी तक बाड़े में झगड़ रही हों और सिलाई की मशीनें अभी तक सर फर 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 कर रही हैं, वहां न जाने कब कपड़े को नया जीवन मिल जाएगा. शहर की सीधी रेखाएं कभी कभी सांस लेती हैं, और ये मेरी जबान मुश्किल से एक वर्ण चख पाती है. कितनी अजीब भाषा है. ये इतवार का दिन है, सब कुछ थमा सा. वहां जो फूल जलते हैं, दरख्त स्कूल के बच्चों में बदल जाते हैं. तितली एक ऐसा पन्ना बन जाती है जिस पर इतिहास खुद को स्वयं लिखेगा. ये शहर, वहां इसके सायरन और सिल्क के कीड़े अपनी संस्कृति हमें पारित करते हैं, क्योंकि मूर्तियों के सूत्र बेहद मजबूत हैं कहीं. It's a beautiful poem. It's a beautiful poem you have written. Please read.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just say that now it was the first massacre I'd heard of when I was a teenager, still, and going there and seeing all the statues where people had been killed, but there was somebody there also sewing. Mis Mai and Milai. Dynion jocan sydd heb oed yn y glaswellt. Sfaliad mewn efydd i bod wrth ei gwaith yn cerdded yn llawr hael yn llygad ei lle. These statues on the grass will not grow old. Neither will they say they do not love their work, at least not while the sun stands sentry over them. There's something whispering. It's an underground stream that twists into a knot here at the ford, translated as the keening of the blood, just there, but with the days a bake stone even at sunset, and the market geese still bickering in their bonds. The sewing machines must purr and stitch, stitch and purr. There. How soon comes resurrection to the cloth? But the day flatlines, it never draws a breath. My tongue might hardly taste a syllable, such a stranger is speech. It's Sunday here, paralysis there. As flower burn, trees turn into school children, and a butterfly becomes the page where history will write itself, and there's the city there, with its sirens and its silkworms slipping their civilization over our skins, because what statue was ever stronger than a thread? Ar flodau'r fflam, coi plant ysgol, daw pili pala di a gwyn a gloiwi ar aden, uwch lawr hanes. ac wrth roi llun ôl i'r ddinas yn sŵn hwteri mynaf oddi yno, y bydd gwybed y gwellt a'r sidan bri yn gwynio, pilyn fesul pilyn dros groi newydd, a cholofnau byw yn geni o'r newydd, edau wydn.
So beautiful, so painful, and so aesthetically, it's a real poetry.
Well, I like
Then
but the ending has a kind of message of hope that, strong threads. There is
that
strong
I
thread.
always like. I always like in your poems that you, at the end, you always positive. Your poems are not negative, not dark. Even though you're writing about the darkness, you are
Yes,
writing about the people who live in darkness.
yeah.
You write, because I remember one poem about even Vietnam, where you enter in that cave, and then you saw that insects are looking at you. It became very funny. So even though it was a very strange, painful situation, but
It was
the way you
terrible. It was terrible. And I was in underground, and all these strange insects around me, huge. And the filming crew wanted to change, something or other, and they left me there for about 10 minutes. I was captive to all these creatures, and yes, it's a funny poem, really. Yeah.
no, but you have taken. You are a poet with the action. Miss, you are not poem in India. We say that ki, in India, for example, now in this Corona time, thousands and thousands people were walking back to their home, the poor people. And what we were doing, we were sitting inside our comfortable home and we were writing about that. But you are not that person. You
No.
have gone on the ground, you fought for it, and you have done. One thing I like very, which impressed me, that when you were starting writing, there was no women poet in the Welsh language. Is it
Well,
true?
no, there weren't many, and one or two who were well known. Rumours went around that they hadn't written the poems. They won prizes, but people said, "Oh, it was a man poet who gave them a poem too." So there was a lot of suspicion about women writing poetry. One person told me after I won some prize or at some event, why don't you write prose? Women are good at writing about, the family or the kitchen or the home. Why write poetry? And since poetry was something allowed by men to think deeply about, and women could just sit at the kitchen table and write. And it wasn't something. My daughter's a novelist and a scriptwriter, but I never liked writing. I've written 3 books for children, novels for children, but writing prose never appealed to me in the same way as poetry, because poetry is such a tightly knit form, and it also is a waiting game. You have an idea and you let it go around your head for a long time before you actually do the deed, as it were, in writing the poem you want to write. And then you have to have drafts and drafts, of course, before the finished article. But poetry to me is such a wonderful way of expressing something without the need of characters and so forth.
It's very nice to know about it, because same thing is everywhere. Even in India, if you ask people that select 10 poets for in this year, for example, in 2020, there will hardly one poet, or sometimes woman poet, or sometimes no. all men. So
Yeah.
the men have a right to become a poet. Though you don't write women poetry, you don't. Feminist means you are not feminist in a way that other feminist poet. You are actually talking about the people who are in the dark. You are talking about, you have many varieties. One thing. Another thing, I feel that I do not know much about the Welsh poetry, but I feel that you created your own poetry style. Is it true?
I think so. My first book, I was trying to be a poet. I tried to write like everybody else, and because I read and I studied Welsh poetry. But my second book of poetry, which won a big prize, I had a miscarriage, and I found myself in the hospital for a week, and I wrote something like 20 poems about losing a child. It was a miscarriage, my first pregnancy, and when the book came out, when I had the prize and the book came out, I realised that I'd found a voice that hadn't been there before. Nobody in Welsh had written about losing a child, and the act of miscarriage. Nobody had written about it, and so it became something that people, women especially, liked, and I suddenly became this feminist poet. And a lot of men thought it was very that it wasn't really poetry. It felt very rough, and because it was. Because the act of losing a miscarriage is quite messy, and they weren't used to that kind of experience being splurged onto a page. And so, but after that, I then went on to write 4 or 5 books in Welsh before I then had Bloodaxe, then publishing my work in both languages. And I've been with Bloodaxe now for 2 decades, but I'm bringing out a book in Welsh only next year. And I feel I owe it to the Welsh audience, because Welsh is the language I write in, and they deserve to see the poems first before they find themselves bilingual in a bilingual volume.
Don't you think that it is very convenient for the man writers to put a stamp of feminist so that they don't lose their space? I because I feel in the name for a poet called Bala Amma. I do not know whether you know. You may know the Kamala Das. Kamala Das were very internationally popular name, feminist poet. Her mother was writing fantastic poetry, and she was also writing, though she belonged to very high class family, and but simple lady, and she has not gone out, but still she was always giving voice to the darkness, the poor people, the laborers, to Naxalite. Even she was writing on, in that age, in 60s, 50s, 60s, she was writing about the postmortem, Naxalite problem, ragging problem, like this problem which she has not experienced. But
Mm.
men critics have forgotten everything about her. Her most popular poetry was taken as a mother poetry because she has written as a grandmother,
Mm.
a poetry for the grandchild. है ना?
Yes.
And that was actually more, those days the mother poetry was there, but grandmother poetry was not there, and she was given a tag of mother poet. And when I talk to critics, many times when they talk about the criticism, and I say that critics do not read it, and then when I say that she is such a strong poet, is stronger than her daughter, uh, bec- uh, but she was given the title of mother poet. So I feel that this is very convenient for the other uh, kind of people, that man critics, to put a stamp that yes, you are feminist, you are mother poet, because you are not losing they are not losing their space. Anyway, this is my experience, my thing.
Well,
So
things are changing in Wales, and a lot of women poets now have been challenging the fact that they need to be studied at schools, and especially the examination board. Um, for example, I am the only woman on a list of 10 poets being studied for a higher education, and this can't be right. I don't want to be an only. I want the other women too, women poets, and so this is a kind of debate that's going on now, that things are changing, and that we will be less lonely in future.
yeah, that is true. I also find that young generation in Indian literature also, they are doing very well. They are fighting for their space, and they are getting their space. That is true in India. Shall we read that your poem about this 257863 HMP?
Okay.
Because this poem also again you have written when you were in a jail, and in a jail soap there was a stamp of queen. That is very interesting. The soap also with the stamp you were getting. So,
Do you
so
want to read?
I will read. It is a very
Okay.
interesting the poem. ये कविता भी जब वो भाषाई आंदोलन के समय मैना एल्फिन जेल में थी तो उन्होंने लिखी थी। और इस कविता में थोड़ा सा वो है, एक सटायर भी है, और उसमें उन्होंने, क्योंकि जेल में जो साबुन मिलता था उस पे जो मोहर होती थी वो मतलब छाप होती थी, वो रानी की होती थी कि भाई अब रानी के साबुन से ही नहाओ। तो ये नंबर उन्होंने दिया है, नंबर 257867 HMP। मुझ पर दया मत दिखाओ, मैं पास्टर नाक नहीं हूँ, ना ही मैं मंडिल स्टम हूँ। मैं अपना रास्ता खुद पालूंगी, 3 घंटे के भीतर मैं अपने घर में होंगी। ये सस्ता होटल है लेकिन जगह समृद्धों की है। भावनाओं और जलीय रंगों के बीच कवि के लिए कटघरे रोटी मक्खन से ज्यादा जरूरी है। दिस इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट लाइन। कवि के लिए कटघरे रोटी मक्खन से ज्यादा जरूरी है। शुक्रिया रानी, मेरे साबुन पर अपनी मोहर के लिए, वक्त के दलिए के लिए, घिसे घिसाए अंगोछों के लिए। मैं यहाँ किसी और मकसद से आई थी, लेकिन एक अभी नया मकसद मिल गया। इट्स अ वंडरफुल पोएट्री। प्लीज रीड इट।
Okay, it's short enough to read in English, and then I'll finish in Welsh,
Yeah,
the whole
please,
poem.
please.
Number 257863 HMP.
Mm.
Don't pity me. I'm no Pasternak, nor Mandelstam. I could buy my way out of here. 3 hours and I'd be home.
Mm.
It's a cheap hotel, but a rich place amongst the watercolours of feeling. Bars are a poet's bread and cheese. Thank you, Queen, for the stamp on my soap, for porridge on time, for threadbare towels. I'm here for a cause, but found new causes. Na chydymdeimlwch â mi, nid Pasternak Mohonov na Mandelstam ychwaith. Gallwn dal i fy ffordd o'r ddalfa, teirawr a byddwn yn y tŷ. Gwesti rhad ac am ddim yw hwn, ond lle cyfoethog, ymysg holl ddyfrliwiau teimlad. Barau yw bara a caws bardd. Diolch frenhines am y stamp a'r sebon am uwd yn ei bryd, am dywelion anrheiliedig. Rwyf yma dros achos, ond es o hyd i achosion newydd.
So here itself, when you were very young, even 18, 19 years old, you know that what is your aim, and you came there for one reason, for one cause, and you get it. This is fantastic. Fantastic. I'm talking to a fantastic poet as well as a fighter. So thank you very much. Do we read another poem that I think mother tongue something like that? I
Okay,
think.
very
Ha.
different. Yes. Um, are you going to read first, or shall I? Shall I say something about it?
Yeah, please, please.
I found it very difficult to write about my mother after she died, but I began to write a series of poems about hair. It's called Theology of Hair. I wanted at one time to be a hairdresser. Would you believe it? Not looking at my
Yeah,
hair
I
now.
saw that. I saw one poem, many poems.
And I'm not a theologian or a hairdresser, so I wrote about theology of hair. And one of the poems then reminded me of the fact that every time my mother would try, I'd have a fringe and she'd push it back and forth. And, you know, especially if I was sick, she would always touch my forehead and try and tidy me up. So, do you want to read first?
No, you read, please. Please, you read. I will
Okay.
read afterward. Huh?
And I read bit in Welsh and then the English and then finish in Welsh. Heniaeth mam a merch. Ar adeg salwch byddai yno'n cletri talcen, dwrdio cydyn i ffwrdd yn tyluno'r dwymin yn fy ngwallt i fwytho nes i mi gysgu. Mother tongue, the old language between mother and daughter. At times of sickness, she'd be there, her palm flat on my forehead, chasing a curl away, kneading the fever which frothed in my hair, stroking it until I fell asleep. On the good days too, when I'd grow older, it made me cringe to the marrow of my bones when she tidied my hair as if I were a rag doll. I avoided a hand cold as steel, sudden lightning. Now I realize at last what it was, the old language between mother and daughter, a finger post to love in a lock. It's like holding a seed's past, that touch in a naked world of a strand of curly gold, the emblem of my pride, each strand on your brow rejoicing. And yes, my loved one day when your hair is white, you will crave the hair's breadth of breath, the fruit of your flesh. A joy fe ddoe dydd fy nwylyn pan fyddi'n benwyn i fethu'r ysu am anadl y cnwd ddaeth o'th gnawd trwch blewyn.
Thank you. Beautiful and touching poem. Beautiful. This poem is talking about mother as well as the mother tongue, as well as the touch of mother. Actually, mother tongue is almost like a touch of mother. That how she makes your hair and all. I read in Hindi. मातृभाषा माँ और बेटी के बीच एक पुरातन भाषा होती है. यह बीमारी के वक्त हरदम साथ होती है. मेरे माथे पर आई लटों को अपनी उंगलियों से संवारती हुई, मेरे बालों को फैनल करने के लिए बुखार को मांटती हुई, मुझे सोने तक थपथपाती हुई. उन खुशनुमा दिनों में जब मैं कुछ बड़ी हुई तो तब भी वे मेरे बालों को सहलाती. मैं अपनी हड्डियों की मज्जा में दुबक जाती, मानो कि कपड़े की गुड़िया हूं. मैं बिजली की तेजी से उस स्टील जैसे ठंडे हाथ को हटाती. अब जाकर समझी कि वह पुरातन भाषा थी माँ और बेटी के बीच. उंगलियों की लटों से स्नेह को बोना, यह मानो भूत के बीच को सहेजना था. इस नग्न संसार में वह स्पर्श घुंघराली स्वर्णिम लट था, मेरे गर्व का चिन्ह था. भों पर पड़ी हर थपथपाहट चेतनादायक थी. हाँ हाँ मेरी प्रिय माँ, एक दिन जब तुम्हारे केश पक गए, तुम चाहने लगी बाल की चौड़ाई सी सांस अपने देह का परिणाम. Beautiful and painful. Thank you very much. Thanks a lot for such a beautiful. This is the beauty of your poetry, because your poetry has many layers. Even though you are talking here, I see that next poem is the hairdresser. It's a very, very that how the Eve, the God has decorated Eve, the hair of Eve, and all these things you have. it's a very funny also, but somewhere it is very touching. So which poem you want to read now? Tell me.
Um, I'm not sure. Should I read one to finish?
Yeah, I think you can read your recent poem. I saw that your
Oh,
Corona poem,
I
because
don't
I
have
saw,
it with me.
you don't
I don't
bring.
have it with me, but
Uh,
I have written a poem about lots of poems about coronavirus, but
uh,
I don't
uh,
have
uh,
them on me,
uh,
unfortunately.
uh.
What
No,
about?
I saw some poems. I saw some poems, recent poems. Uh,
Yes, I think. Have you copied? No, you have not. No.
uh,
I could read it to finish the poem that was chosen to be on the tubes in London, on the
yeah, please,
London Underground. I
please.
I was I was thrilled one day to open my emails and get all these a flurry of emails from people saying, "I've just read your poem on the Underground and I'm full of tears," or it reminded me of an aunt I loved, or I had to sit between two men and they could see me crying. And I didn't mean to write a poem that would make people cry, but it was chosen. I didn't know what they were talking about until I discovered that my poem had been chosen and was put up on the Underground in London. So this is about Brooch, about a friend of mine who died at an early age, she's only in her 30s, from cancer. And the only thing, I had to write a poem for her funeral, and I remembered her wonderful, wonderful jewellery. So this is called Brooch.
Yeah, I remember, Broach. I
So
remember.
shall I read it? Because it's very
Please,
short and it would
please,
perhaps
please read.
conclude
Please
the
read.
session.
Uh,
Yeah.
uh.
I'll read three lines in Welsh. Broich, cofam Stephanie MacLeod. Y mae lle I allanolion, clustlyse, a bellfwclys, breichledau o feini bychain. They have their place, accessories, earrings, the odd necklace, gemstone bracelets, and yet it's from the soft inner depth we work the brooch of our lives, that jewelled keepsake set to outlast us. Yours it was a brooch ablaze, the passion-crafted clasp, the light chain to keep it safe. Others now will wear your brooch, this jewel fashioned from a golden heart. It will catch the sun. It will dazzle us. Heddiw eraill fydd yn ei gwisgo y tlws a grewyd o fynwes eiraid gan ddal llygaid yr haul a'n dallu.
Thank you very much. Shall I read in Hindi? It is.
Yes,
This
please.
is the third poem, Brooch poem. ये ब्रोच कविता इन्होंने अपने एक मित्र के लिए रखी जिसकी मृत्यु हो गई थी और जिन्होंने उन्होंने एक आभूषण के द्वारा अपने मित्र को याद किया है और इस कविता को लंदन में के जो अंडरग्राउंड रेलवे स्टेशन है वहां पर इनको लगाया गया है, वहां पर इनकी इस कविता को स्थान दिया गया था। ब्रूच, हर सजावटी चीज की अपनी अपनी जगह होती है। आभूषण जैसे बूंदे, पुरानी मालाएं, जवाहरात और कंगन फिर भी अपने भीतर की मुलायम गहराई से अपनी जिंदगी के ब्रूच पर काम करते हैं। वे ही हमारी अमिट निशानी बन जाती हैं। और तुम्हारा वाला चमकदार ब्रूच था, वह उत्कंठा और बकुसुए वाला था, जिस पर सुरक्षा की एक नन्ही सी जंजीर भी लगी थी। अब तुम्हारे सुनहरे दिल से सजे ब्रूच को दूसरे लोग पहनेंगे और ये सूरज से टक्कर लेगा, हमें चकाचौंध करता हुआ। Thank you very much. This is a poem about this. This is the strange thing which I love in your poetry, that every painful poetry convert with at the end it gives you a light, it gives you a hope, and your whole life is like this. That if somebody reads your life, that how you fought, how you stand, and how you worked, and how you write poetry, how you write. I think you have write novels also. No, you have
Yes,
written novels, and
yes,
you are very good playwriter, no, playwriter. I
yes,
think.
I should be
Uh,
writing a play now for the National Theatre in Wales, but there's no
uh,
theatre and there's no
uh,
audience, so that
because,
will have to wait. Yeah.
because I remember that your plays are coming in a radio Welsh, no? For
Yes.
Radio Welsh also you were writing,
Yes.
and many places you have, and you are a very good mother and very good grandmother, because I remember when I asked you something and you said that, Rati, I'm 2 weeks, I'm very busy with my grandchildren, I have to take care of my grandchildren. So that is, you are a very honest grandmother, that yes, when I'm looking after my grandchildren, no poetry, nothing, no communication. So you are an all-rounder. That is, you are, and you are a mother, grandmother, you are a beautiful daughter, and you are fighter for your country, your people, your women of the, because you told me many stories when you go to meet, you work for the coal workers who were actually in a depression, and their wives, and all the way you work inside your country. You worked in Mexico, you work for the Kurd, you work for Nigeria, you work for Vietnam. I don't think that anyone compete with you.
Yeah.
We learn from you. You are of my age, but I tell you that you are my teacher, guru. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Maina. Thank you. It
Thank
was
you so
so
much.
nice. I hope that we will spend again 2 3 days together. I remember that when we bought a black coat,
Oh,
that,
I was going to ask about the black coat.
that
It,
photo is always liked by everyone, because you helped me to buy that black sheep coat, and we do some little bit shopping. We eat together. I hope
and
we get this.
my
Uh,
students loved you doing a reading at the university as well. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot. Your
Yeah.
thanks, Maina. See
Okay.
you again. It was so wonderful to talk to you, and hope we will meet sometime again.
Yes. Soon.